Hi everyone, welcome to this important conversation from Springtide Research Institute. We are continuing to recognize Mental Health Awareness Month, and this is the second part of a conversation we've been having this week specifically in honor of Mental Health Action Day. Mental Health Action Day is actually tomorrow, but we're recognizing it throughout the week as a continued partner with MTV's Mental Health Action Day. It's trying to take mental health awareness and turn it to action. So we're not just talking about mental health, but we're actually making real changes. And so I have three phenomenal young people that are going to be joining tonight's conversation. They're all connected in one way or another to our Springtide Ambassadors program. And I already see their requests coming through. So let's let some of them in. We'll have them introduce themselves and get into the conversation together. Astrid joining now, and a couple more after that. We have been, hi Astrid.
Hello.
Thanks for jumping right in. I'm gonna have you introduce yourself in just a minute. I know we have a couple more coming in, so let's get everyone into the conversation. And I see Savanna's request. Let's let her in, and then I think Claire's going to be joining as well, but really looking forward to discussing all things with you. Hi, Savanna.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
Yes.
We have one more joining. Let's make sure everything's working to get them into the conversation. Thank you for making time. We're spread across the US, y'all. We literally are spanning coast to coast for this conversation. I know Savannah's in Pacific time, Astrid's in Central time, I'm in Eastern time. Claire, who's about to join, is also in Central time. So let's get Claire in here now. We've been having already really interesting dialogue this week that I'm looking forward to continuing with you all related to ways that young people like yourselves are reflecting on our mental health research. Hey, Claire.
Hello.
We're all here. We're all connected. I love this. So for those who don't know me, I'm Marte Aboagye. I'm the head of engagement at Springtide, and I am so lucky that I get to hang out with these young people once a month through our Springtide Ambassadors program, and occasionally more when they decide to join me for public conversations or other offerings like this. Claire is our SAP Leadership Fellow. So the shorthand of our Springtide Ambassadors program is SAP. Claire's been with us for a few years, and then Astrid and Savanna are both in our 2025 SAP cohort. So I would love for you each to introduce yourself more thoroughly. Give them your name, your age, the state you live in, and your pronouns, and then maybe just why you care about this. Why is mental health something you're passionate about discussing in these types of conversations? What's your why for being here, really? And I'll have Claire go first, just since she's been with us for a while.
Of course. My name's Claire. I see her pronouns, and I'm calling in from Minneapolis. Mental health has always just been a subject I find so interesting and especially for our generation represented in Springtide, because there's not only so much important work surrounding destigmatizing mental health, but just a lot of conversations about how rates of mental illness are increasing in this generation, making healthcare more and more important. So I work in the mental health field now through Springtide. So it's something very important.
Yeah, it's so cool that your actual work is connected to this even. And you're right that young people have told us and shown us over and over that they really do care about destigmatizing it. And I want to get y'all's take on that even later in the conversation. We'll have Astrid go next.
Hello, I'm Astrid. I'm 21 years old and I'm calling in from Tennessee. And she, her pronouns. The reason why I wanted to do the call is because, at least for me, I've always seen mental health as an important aspect of a young person's life, especially, like growing up, you have to start like figuring out kind of who you are, who you want to be, and the sorts of emotions that come with that turmoil. And especially for me, I'm more passionate about getting mental health resources to immigrant or first generation communities, because I know especially with our communities, it's harder to talk about these sorts of things. It's seen more as a luxury when at this point it feels like a necessity for a lot of students who might feel alone in the transition into the US or into transition into academic life or higher education. So I think for me, it's really important bringing that into minority communities and kind of emphasizing the actual proactivity and benefit it can give to younger people.
Ah, I love that. So well said, both of you already. I really care about what you're describing, Astrid, and it's so cool for you as a current, well, recent graduate, like as of last week, right? Current, I was gonna say current college student, recent college grad, that you've seen firsthand the ways that talking openly can impact people right where they're at, especially if it's something that has been in an under-resourced community for whatever reason. So thank you for who you are, what you do, and congrats on recent
Thank
graduation.
you.
We'll have Savanna go next.
All right. Hi, I'm Savanna. I'm 16 years old and I'm from Seattle, Washington. I'm kind of just really interested in this topic and joining this conversation because I feel like there's so much to still be discovered about mental health and so much to be talked about. And I kind of feel like, especially being a high school student, the more and more like we talk about conversations like this, the more awareness like the more awareness that it will bring and just like overall bring more like understanding to the topic. But yeah.
So true, so true. And I love that we have current high school student, teen, as well as 20 somethings in the conversation. Like that's just a nice mix. Springtide studies 13 to 25-year-olds. And so the fact that y'all are in different seasons of life, different stages in your own academic life. Some of you are looking towards grad school, I know. Some of you are in high school, probably soon thinking about college applications. There's a lot that happens in our academic worlds and a lot of pressures are in those spaces, and mental health is often like a first line responder need in these academic institutions, in educational spaces. That's often where mental health breaks and crises are often most shown or exasperated. And so I want to first talk about schools, because teachers and all school support staff even are often seeing what families might be missing even in a young person's life. They might have more day-to-day interactions, or especially if a student doesn't even live at home anymore and they're in a campus setting, like those spaces can have such a huge impact, and unfortunately sometimes a negative impact. But how can we help educators and everyone who's involved in a school really have more transformative conversations just by openly talking about mental health and making sure the right support and resources are in place? So something we're going to be digging into a little bit later in the conversation is this tool even called A.S.K, that educators, young people themselves, trusted adults of all different professions and spaces can utilize. But I want to preview it quickly. So that support tool is the theme of this year's Mental Health Action Day. It's again called A.S.K, and it stands for Acknowledge, Support, Keep in Touch. So just keep that in the back of your head, because we're going to be coming back to that. But when we think about schools, think about anywhere you've been. It could be somewhere you're currently at, somewhere previously, all the way back to middle school. Where have you seen schools get it right? Like, where have you seen something like this was really a positive conversation or program or initiative that happened in schools that related to mental health? And where could schools get it better? Those are the two questions I want you all to weigh in on. We have a statistic from Springtide that I want to bring into the conversation, though, as you're thinking about that. Springtide found that more than 1 in 3 young people told us that they feel lonely at school, often or most of the time. More than 1 in 3 feel lonely often or most of the time in their school setting. And this was looking at both high school settings up to post-secondary, college, and universities. So all of those places you're surrounded by your peers. You know, you're not just like alone usually in a school environment. You're usually around a lot of people, and yet young people are telling us that that's a place that they often experience significant loneliness. And people are falling through the cracks often. They're going unnoticed and unappreciated, unacknowledged maybe. So Springtide has looked a lot at loneliness. We've looked at belonging. And that statistic is specifically in a report we released a few years ago called Mental Health and Gen Z, What Educators Need to Know. So keep that thought in your mind, knowing that schools can be a place that offer great connection. And the schools are trying to get it right. I really do believe that. I've worked in public schools myself. Where have you seen a school really do something that was effective, and what recommendations would you have for our school community as a whole, educators, to do something that could have a real impact? And whoever wants to go first, jump in.
Well, I like thinking all the way back to like my middle school experience. Well, I guess not all the way back, but a couple years back.
Yeah.
We had like a school counselor, and she was very involved with the students.
I still hear you. Oh, but maybe it froze for a second. Okay, Savannah's maybe coming back into the conversation. These things happen sometimes when it's live. While she's coming back in, do one of you want to jump in?
I can jump in. Can you hear me?
Thanks, Claire.
Yeah. So the recommendation that actually first came to my mind is not from a school that I went to, but from a book I read recently called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. He talks a lot about schools and their various like mental health strategies that like they've been trying and implementing, like which ones have been successful and unsuccessful. And the one that he primarily recommends, and just reading it was really convincing for me, was for schools to ban cell phones within their like schools. And I know that could sound radical for some kids, and I know a lot of kids wouldn't enjoy that, but all of the presented and just my experience with technology has led me to believe that's something educators should consider.
I hear about it more and more of schools actually doing it, of like you have to lock it up during the day, like that there's certain parameters of where it's being tested out and even enforced in different academic settings. And you're right, it's a big topic right now. It's a big concern for sure. So love that you're reading those types of books, Claire. Love that you're bringing that recommendation in. And Savanna, we know that live conversations sometimes have little glitches, but we're ready to hear you continue the thought you were talking about your counselor in middle school.
Yes, okay. Yeah, sorry, my phone like totally shut off there for a second.
These things happen.
But I feel like really the biggest takeaway that I got from her was like the relationship that she had within our classroom, so that it wasn't just like, oh, the school counselor. It was like we knew her by name, and kids like would sometimes go there even when they felt totally fine, just because they wanted to talk to her, just because they wanted to hang out. And so when something maybe was off, they felt so comfortable going to her office to talk to her about the hard things too. And I feel like that makes such a difference, because it's kind of like a friend who has maybe some more power. Maybe you can go in there and she can like talk to her teacher and be like, hey, they were having a hard day. They just sat in my office. And so I feel like schools could do a better job of like almost removing the stigma around school counselors and encouraging more of like a friendship and a relationship. And I feel like that will lead to so much more like potential, and students maybe utilizing that like resource a lot more.
I love that she went out of her way in a very intentional way to build those relationships. That it wasn't just like, oh, I guess there's a counselor with an office somewhere, I don't even know where it is, but that she's going into your classes, she knows you by name, you know her, you feel like it's a safe, inviting place when you do want to seek her out, because she's already made the effort to build those connections in your classrooms. I love that. I wish for every school to have that type of school counselor connection. That's a great example of something that got right, and that's something that more schools can do. Astrid, what would you want to bring up as something that is either gone really well or something that you'd want to recommend schools pay more attention to and do better with?
Yeah, I mean, kind of to build off of Savanna, like just a more general, what she said is, I was going to say the same thing of like taking more personal approaches towards your students, and at least also encouraging students to be more open to getting out of their shell, you know, kind of building up their confidence so that, like you said, they are feeling lonely. And that mostly comes from one, like with the peer-to-peer interactions, but then also like with your teachers. Like a lot of the time schools are focused more on the academic sense, less on like the personal approaches of like, and I understand like, you know, teachers, like they have a lot of things on their plate, but just at least remembering the small things, or at least encouraging students to kind of like branch out and talk to one another, and less of like a group project type of way, but more like as a like a normal social interaction. I think that would help significantly students with the loneliness aspect, but also to build their confidence in just interacting with other people, as well as supporting one another. And I think, yeah, like I just think a lot of students, they're missing just like the smaller, like, oh, someone remembers me, or like kind of like Savannah was saying, she remembered their names. And I think that's the most important thing, is like just at least remembering one little thing about everybody. Then it kind of makes you feel significant in your own way.
So true, so true. It really reminds me of a tool that Springtide references in that mental health and Gen Z, what educators need to know report. And it's shown up in other resources we have, like our belonging report. But it's hopefully a simple thing to keep in mind, kind of like ask that we'll be getting to in this conversation, but it's noticed, named, known. And if more young people feel genuinely noticed, that their presence is something that is missed when they're not around, even in their classes that they're required to go to, if they feel acknowledged, if they feel like, hey, they know my name, they know things about me, they check in on me, or they're tracking different things that matter to me, whether that's an extracurricular or a family story, or maybe something about someone's cultural identities. It's just seeing young people for who they are, the fullness of who they are, and valuing that and demonstrating that, and really building those relationships that are being referenced by several of you. Those tools go so far when it comes to a young person feeling lonely, even in a crowded or busy school environment. So I love these ideas. I love what you've seen happen effectively, what you would recommend could be done better, all the way from technology use to counselors to building those connections and relationships. It's really, really helpful to hear. I want to share one more stat from Springtide, and this comes from our latest research that we did in 2024 about Gen Alpha. Gen Alpha is a little younger than y'all, but they are coming up now. We did a survey in 2024 of 13-year-olds, because at that time that was the oldest members of Gen Alpha, and they just had entered Springtide's age window, since we studied 13 to 25-year-olds. And we asked them a lot about technology, about the impact of COVID on their life. We asked them about their mental health, among other things. And when it came to mental health, I'm looking at my notes to make sure I'm saying the statistic right. 85% of the 13-year-olds we surveyed said that open discussions about mental health is good for society. So that's no small number. That's a clear majority. 85% saying that talking openly about mental health is good for society. It's hard to get
coming from
consensus of that number. Yeah, go
yeah.
for it. What were we going to say?
I was gonna say, especially coming from such young kids who are only 13, and they're already acknowledging that, like, hey, when me and my friends talk about this, or my teachers talk about this, like, it makes me feel so much better. And like that's
So
I feel
right.
so yeah.
You're so right. Sometimes people are dismissive to what a 13-year-old could even think or feel about mental health, that they'd be like, well, they don't have an opinion about this, but that such a big majority are saying, yeah, it matters, and it's good for society as a whole when we have these open conversations about it. That just really shows the ways that young people, obviously both of you in Gen Z, have already cared so much about destigmatizing mental health. I hear that over and over in my conversations with young people, and the research shows that. But the fact that this latest emerging generation is communicating that, I think we really need to pay attention to them, period. But especially when 85% are saying this. So I'm wondering if you have an example or a story. You don't obviously need to disclose more than you feel comfortable with, but an example or a story where you saw a direct connection to talking openly about mental health, how that positively impacted yourself or maybe a community or an organization you're a part of. Any examples you can share? I'd love to hear them.
Um, well, freshman year, we used to have this program at our school where like all the freshmen would kind of be mentored by some like upperclassmen, and they would come to the freshman homeroom and they would talk to them. And one of the topics that these like seniors would talk to us about was mental health. And at the end of their like presentation, they kind of just said like, is there anything that anyone needs to get off their chest? And it was kind of like a moment. We're all freshmen, we're kind of new to each other, and we're kind of like,
Yeah.
oh, this is kind of
Right.
uncomfortable. And this one girl just started sharing. She started talking about her family life. She started talking about everything. And I feel like one of like some high schoolers' biggest fears when it comes to that is like, I'm going to be judged. But the room was just like super welcoming. And after she finished sharing, the seniors were like, okay, this is something very important. And we just want to make sure that like what was said in this room stays in this room. And we don't want it to become anything that it's not.
Yeah.
And I feel like for me, especially after that moment, it made me realize like people truly are, you can't make assumptions. You need to just be sensitive with people. And I feel like that's something you hear from such a young age. Is like, you never know what someone's going through. But
Right.
I really did realize like I need to be ultra sensitive with people. I need to be kind with my words because there's so much more going on than we don't think. And I feel like it just kind of led to almost like a more like sensitive and kind culture within, especially that homeroom, where we all shared something with each other and we're like, wow, there's just more to consider when we're talking to people who maybe we don't know very well.
That's really encouraging to hear that there's peers. I mean, yes, seniors are older, but peers-ish, modeling this and creating these spaces for their own school community. That it's not just like, hey, you're on your own. Like every movie that's about a high school scenario is usually, it shows it being so rough. People are like making fun, making cliques. It does not look like an inviting atmosphere to have those kind of conversations. And while those movie depictions sometimes are, I know they're exaggerations, I also think sometimes they do feel accurate to what school environments or campuses might feel like. And so just to have a different scenario where this was an open conversation, it was created as a container and space for people to be authentic with each other,
Yeah.
and that was really honored and uplifted, that being vulnerable, being honest about mental health, like you said, you don't know what someone's going through, was done in such like a proactive way. Like, let's talk about it now, instead of it just being like murmurs and whispers or things that you turn into rumors even about other people. That it was just like, let's confront this in an honest and helpful way. I think that's beautiful. I love that it reframed your own approach and assumptions even. That's really, really powerful. Thanks, Savanna. And we're so glad you're back in, Claire. We know technology is funky sometimes, but y'all are rolling with it. So we're talking about where Gen Alpha has told us they care about mental health being destigmatized or it just being an open conversation. And as Gen Zers, I know that's something y'all care about too. So examples, Astrid or Claire, about where you've seen open conversations about mental health really help yourself or the communities you're connected to.
Yeah. At least for me, from the transition from like high school to college, I think for me, it was the most important to realize how big of an impact having cultural groups or associations or clubs is to the environment of a young person, especially within higher education. At least I was part of like the Hispanic Student Associations at our college campus, and just more like multicultural, like I guess programming or events management is happening. And I feel like that was the one thing that I really enjoyed the most about being in college, is because at least in high school, like I went to a predominantly white school, and so there was just, to me, it was kind of like of maybe I shouldn't say anything because people wouldn't understand, or like I think there's just a level of comfort when you do have that acknowledgement that this is a cultural difference. Just because I know for some cultures, some things are different, some things are the same, and we just all have different reactions to different things. So I think for me, that was the one thing that like I saw the importance of is having spaces where multicultural activities can happen or just cultural like appreciation can happen, especially having open conversations with people facing kind of similar like situations as you, or just even if you know you haven't personally experienced it, you've heard of like let's say a family member or someone who has it within your community. And I think it benefits not only the person sharing, like Savanna said, like you open that vulnerability, you open a sense of connection to the person sharing, but as well I think it benefits the most the person listening. If you're kind of like if you are the one actively listening, I think it opens you to become more of a compassionate human being, just or enough to acknowledge certain situations that you might not be aware of that are impacting people or the majority of people. So I think that was the one thing for me that I noticed was it both benefits the person sharing but also the person listening, because you are opening yourself to new experiences and to new understandings of the way every human being kind of thinks of the same situation. So yeah.
Oh, so powerful. I love hearing you describe where affinity spaces, where there's some sort of shared cultural connection, or it might be similar languages, backgrounds, where you don't have to explain yourself so much,
Yeah.
where there's a commonality shared in those affinity spaces, that those places can be so effective to have these mental health conversations. And you're right, Astrid, that often the sharing is so important, but the people receiving that, the people listening, it can, in ways that you don't even know that you're sharing, could be impacting someone, especially when there is already a shared background going into it. That's where a lot of destigmatizing can happen, right? When there's a common connection already for the members of the group to be like, I got you. I know where you're coming from, or I understand. And I also understand what you're describing about mental health because we have these other common connections, or you're opening my eyes to understand it because we have these other common connections. So beautifully put. So great to hear that your campus did have that type of space for you. And I know that a lot of other students have benefited from those types of affinity spaces in high schools and in college and beyond. So sometimes those come even in extracurricular clubs and activities. So the more those types of niche spaces and affinity groups can have open dialogues about mental health, the more it's being destigmatized as a whole, and the more that that stretches into other communities. Claire, what do you want to offer about ways where open conversations about mental health can really have impacted you, or can impact the communities in which you're connected?
Yeah, of course. So for me, similarly in my college, I really appreciated that like when I was a freshman and doing kind of like the required like freshman intake classes and stuff, there was a lot of emphasis on like mental health resources that the school provided. So like at my university, we got like I think it was like 10 or 20 like free therapy
Oh, that's
sessions
great.
through the
Great.
school. Yeah,
That's actually a
every
significant number too.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of students utilize that, and I thought that and just like open conversations, not just about like I mean like this talk, like not just mental health destigmatizing, but also like action.
Yep.
I really appreciated that the school did a lot of actions to like actually support students and just recognize that like sometimes students are having mental health issues, and that really can impact their performance and things in school. So yeah, I appreciate when the schools take action. Yeah.
I mean, and the fact that it's happening right when someone starts in their university or college setting for what you're referencing here, that it's not just like, oh, we might want to get on that, but like it's setting that tone, it's making that cultural norm, hopefully, like just normalizing mental health from the onset, like Savanna described that as a freshman in high school. You're describing that as a freshman in college. That the beginning, the way you enter into these environments is saying mental health is a real part of everyone's life. It's something everyone has, it's something everyone experiences. And so how can we be caring for that from the onset? What sort of resources do we want to make sure students know about from the jump so that they can be more successful and that things don't always have to reach a crisis point if we can be more proactive from the beginning points that y'all are describing. So this is tremendous. I love hearing where campuses are getting things right, and hopefully more and more schools are paying attention and making these actions a real part of how they do incoming students and new student orientation, the ways that they make this just a normal part. And offering 10 to 20 sessions, that's big. I know other students will say, my school had a waiting list and you couldn't even move off the waiting list to get the support you need. But if that is something that students could really practically access, I love that. Even when I was in grad school, I was like, free therapy? Yeah, I'm taking advantage of that. So when students can tap into those resources, even better. Okay, so let's get into A.S.K. I referenced it a little bit in the conversation, but it is a really helpful tool because so many young people have said, I want to support my friend, but I don't really know how to. So it's not expecting someone to be a mental health expert or provider. It's really how can you come alongside someone. So this could be with a peer. This could be with a trusted adult coming along to support you. So I want to hear your take on both of those scenarios. But again, let me just describe what this tool is. So the acronym is A.S.K, A.S.K, acknowledge. That's really just acknowledge what someone is going through. You know, they're describing it to you. Show that you hear them. Maybe reflect back what they're saying. Acknowledging it. Then support is the S. Maybe ask what they need instead of assuming or just saying, oh yeah, I've been there, you should do this, this, and this. Like ask. The word itself is ask, but support by asking what they need. And then K, keep in touch, means keep showing you care, keep showing up. Don't just be like, oh yeah, I already talked to them, they're good. Like there's needs to be some follow-up and follow-throughs, because mental health is it's a process, it's a journey. It's not just something that you're done with, that's taken care of. And so to really demonstrate that you're supporting a friend, acknowledge, support, keep in touch. So bearing that that description in mind, I think it is a really helpful tool. MTV even has resources where you can go through simulations to kind of say, I would do this or this, and it takes you down a different path. If you Google it, you'll find this. But thinking practically about your own lives, how could you see this tool being helpful for the ways that you might want to show up for a friend? And how could you see this tool being helpful if a trusted adult in your life, whether that's a coach or a mentor, or a teacher, a parent, aunt, uncle, whomever, if they were to use A.S.K to try to connect and offer support to you, how would that be helpful to you? So yeah, what do you want to say about this tool, A.S.K?
Well, something I feel like that I really like about it is the K, the keep in touch, because I feel like a very important part of like coming alongside someone maybe in their mental health journey is like kind of what I mentioned earlier about the like student the counselors, where you just kind of need like a really strong base of a friendship. So I really like this tool because I feel like it shows how being a friend in like the highs just makes an even stronger friendship. So maybe when your friend needs to come to you about something more serious, or you see they're struggling with some like with mental health, you can be like, okay, wait, we have a strong basis. I know I can come to them about this. Maybe I know how this friend approaches daily life when she's feeling really great, and then I can just kind of come alongside her in maybe a different way than if you weren't as close as you were before.
Yeah, it's like that relational capital has already
Right.
been built, so that it's not just a random scenario to have someone ask how you're doing,
Yeah.
but you're already regularly connecting, keeping in touch in those
Yeah.
ways. Great.
At least for me, the way that I see Ask is I think it's more critical on, like Savanna said, the relationships you already have. Just because I feel like a lot of people, the one thing like that I think I've ran across a lot is people are too scared to point out when you're feeling down, or too scared to assume that you are feeling a certain type of way.
Yeah.
So I think for me, the acknowledge piece is very like, or the whole
Yeah.
ask method, I think it's very intentional with the way that you approach someone. So I think acknowledging is more, I think it's less like waiting for someone to be crying than,
Yeah.
like Savannah said, you know, the way that they operate day to day. You can kind of see, just being more of like a person who sees, I guess, the like smaller things. So like, I mean, there's always tone, like the way someone speaks. Like if it is someone you run across daily, you kind of can tell when someone's tired or hungry or sleepy. Like you kind of see these small basic, I guess, emotions or feelings. And I think those are the pieces that I think we need to start acknowledging more. Because like you said, I think being proactive before something starts, weighing someone down, I think usually comes from when they are stressed, or let's say they have something coming up. And I think kind of pointing out like, hey, like I noticed, you look tired today. Like, is everything okay? Just kind of pointing out those simple, basic emotions. Because at least the way that I see it, I think it's better to ask and be wrong and they're perfectly fine than to leave them feeling like, oh, my friend didn't notice that I'm feeling a particular type of way. So I think, it's better to ask or better to just point it out. Because it at least shows that like you are paying attention to them, you are caring about the way that they are feeling on a daily basis. And then at least for the keep in touch, like Savanna said, I think it is a critical piece as well, especially more so for like the adults, just because I feel like a lot of young people, like they don't really like speaking up about it, especially with people who are older than them, who aren't, let's say, teachers or parents. I think just because I think a lot of like younger people assume like, what do they know about, the 21st century, or like, let's say like they're having like social issues. I just feel like relationships now are slightly different than before. So I think a lot of students or younger people kind of make the big assumption that someone else would not understand that if they aren't their age. So I think for the adults, it's more the keep in touch piece, or being more consistent and like not taking no for an answer, but just basically like understanding that it kind of takes time to build that rapport up. And also like it just takes consistency, and a lot of younger people, like let's say like middle school age, high school age, like you're still kind of trying to figure out what these basic emotions are. And so and if someone just comes at you and like, oh, how are you? Your automatic response is just good. Like it's just like, yeah, I'm fine.
We're all kind of built, trained that way.
Yeah, so I think at least for adults, it's more the like patient aspect of like, or just asking more leading questions to get them thinking of like, are you really fine? Instead of just being like, oh, I'm good. So I think, yeah.
And I really like how at the beginning, you were saying like when you know your friend really well, the little things you notice, which kind of prevents maybe something even further.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you know your friends super well because you have like a really great relationship and you've kept in touch, then like I feel like you're able to support them really well. Maybe you can bring them water, maybe you can bring them food, and you can just like ask more questions, which I feel like is I think something we kind of underestimate about mental health, because when we're talking about mental health, I feel like we often think about the extremes. And it's like, well, there's little things that are like leading up to that. And if we're keeping in touch and if we're like really following the steps we've asked, then we can maybe prevent some of that. And we can just really support people when they're in maybe a smaller like range of whatever they're struggling.
Yeah, you're right. It does build on each other. It's not just that like the crisis didn't come out of nowhere, a crisis point. So even before we're at a crisis point, how can you be journeying alongside someone? And yeah, you're both right that it does take some patience, whether that's with a peer or whether that's a trusted adult, that just someone might say, I'm fine. And that like, but maybe there's more there. And so to keep building those connections, to keep checking in, to show that you genuinely care, that will go somewhere. We're hearing it from you all yourselves that yeah, it's not just a one and done. you've both referenced the keep in touch is so critical, just for getting to the place to have trust built, but then also for, okay, someone has shared that they are going through something really tough. Maybe I'm going to connect them to a professional or a resource, but I'm still going to keep checking in on them. It's not just that I like pass them off, but I'm going to keep showing them that I'm here for them. So love what you're both acknowledging with both peers and trusted adults. What would you want to add, Claire?
I really appreciate the support piece of A.S.K, because I feel like sometimes it can be kind of hard, like, oh, if somebody comes to you with a mental health issue, like, what do I do? And just the intention to, like, think about how can I support this person, especially, like, if you're a teacher or an administrator, you know, like, in that position working with students, like, what can I do in my role to make their life easier, to lessen, like, burdens or whatever as they're dealing with this in whatever way, like, that they're able to. I think that is so important, and sometimes all you can do as a teacher and administrator, but is, like, such a huge thing, even if you're not able to, like, help directly with what is going on in that student's mental health, just to be able to show that intention and to help in any, like, way that they can.
Yeah. I'm glad you pointed that out, because the support part, I think, is where people get tripped up a lot of the time. They're like, I can acknowledge what someone just told me, like, show them that I heard them. I can keep in touch with them. Check, check. Like, those feel like they're essential components, but the support part in the middle is a little murkier often. And that's where people, I think, sometimes feel nervous about getting it right. And sometimes the nervousness means you just start talking about yourself and be like, oh, I was there, I've been there, this happened to me. And it's like, hold up, like, this isn't about you right now. Like, we're receiving where someone else is at, and that support piece doesn't mean you have to have all the answers. It's really about asking what someone needs. Maybe it is like a physical need in that moment. I need a hug. Maybe it's like, I need to meet with a therapist, and you're like, okay, let's find someone for you together. Maybe it's, like, when you ask what someone needs, it's like, I just need to go to bed earlier this week because I'm so sleep deprived that it's really affecting me. Like, asking instead of assuming, and then helping connect to what someone is asking for. And yeah, someone doesn't always know what they need, but it's at least giving them the chance to describe that instead of making it about yourself or just prescribing something without really hearing them out. So it's making it like, I'm here for you. We're going to figure this out together is the support element. So I love all the insights that you've shared today. I want to say it one more time: acknowledge, support, keep in touch. Those are the three elements of A.S.K. You all have had fantastic examples of ways that schools can be more proactive when it comes to mental health, the ways that having open conversations in various communities and spaces can destigmatize mental health, and the ways that you see this tool A.S.K being utilized in your own lives. And I hope that people listening either today or to the recording later on will really take everything you've shared to heart. If you're looking for any of the resources that Springtide has, you can find them on our website, springtideresearch.org. And again, just Google A.S.K, A.S.K if you want to utilize those resources, or even the simulation to think about how, when you're in a real life scenario, you've already sort of practiced it, of how you might respond to a young person in your own life. So thank you again. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Savanna. Thank you, Astrid. So appreciate who you each are and for making mental health more of an open conversation today. Take care.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.